Have you ever noticed how big ag and big medicine, big pharma, they all seem to have a lot of treatments for different diseases, but never a real cure? That is, they never seem to address the underlying problem that causes disease. Rather, they want to give you a chemical that can fix the symptoms. So why is that? Well, I think they can't make money off a healthy animal, so they don't give you the cure. Rather, they give you a never-ending series of treatments because that's where the money is. So to get around these nimrods, we need to find a cure ourselves for coccidia by looking at nature and how nature handles things, and then devise a plan to use that for our own advantage. Coccidia is a protozoa that's found in the gut of a sheep, and it goes through several stages in its life cycle where it goes in the sheep. It comes out as oocyst in the sheep feces, and it's dormant for a while, but then it hatches out, and then it's ingested by the next sheep, and that's how it reproduces itself in all the sheep. And we can listen to what other people say on their websites about coccidia and how they treat it, but really the best place is to look at a modern university, an agricultural college or university, and get information there. One good source is Ohio State University. They have a small ruminant team there, and they've got a really good article on coccidiosis and how to prevent it. Of course, they're going to come at you from a chemical-based background because all the universities are really funded by the big ag chemical companies. So they're not going to be against the chemicals, but they will tell you all the information you need to get around the problem entirely without using any chemicals at all. This is an excellent article. It talks about how coccidiosis is a parasitic disease caused by a protozoa and how coccidia has a life cycle. When it first comes out of the feces of a sheep or a goat, it's called an oocyte. It's like an egg-like structure. And when the oocyte is first passed, it's not infective. Rather, it must undergo a period of development called sporulation or hatching. So before the sheep can be infected, the oocyte has to sporulate or hatch. And to sporulate or hatch requires both oxygen and moisture and enough time that's warm enough for it to hatch. So if the oocyte in the sheep feces is buried underground where it can't have oxygen, if it's buried or there's no moisture, it won't hatch, as well as it's got to have warmer weather for it to hatch. So the warmer the weather, the faster the development of the oocyte and the more infective it becomes. But if it's cold, they won't hatch. That means that for all the baby lambs that are born in the winter, they don't have oocytes hatching out. There's no hatching of coccidia when the weather's too cold for it. They're all temperature dependent and they can't sporulate. This is why winter is the best time for baby lambs to be born. I've never seen one of my lambs ever have problems with coccidia in the winter. The Ohio State article goes on to tell us that the oocytes cannot be killed by ordinary disinfectants. The only way to kill coccidia eggs are either extreme desiccation, which is a very dry wind, or direct sunlight. Otherwise, these oocytes or these eggs for coccidia will survive for like a year or longer if it's protected from direct sunlight. So a barn where there's lots of moisture and protection from sunlight, that's a perfect place for these oocytes to hatch out for coccidia. So any kind of animal that's kept in a barn that's a little bit weak, like this ram, which died about a few days later, it probably died from coccidia because I didn't lock it out of the barn. I should have kept it out of the barn after the weather warmed up. And that's probably what I did wrong. Yet during warm weather, I never saw any problems with a lamb that was born outside, that was kept out of the barn. And the mothers could handle it perfectly. Only during the coldest part of the winter should I ever let the animals into the barn, especially with their little lambs. So that's what this article taught me. The Ohio State article also tells you that you only have to worry about transmission to lambs when they're between 1 and 6 months old. They're the ones that are going to get the coccidia, with the most critical time being the 4 to 8 week old lambs. So this is the time I need to keep the lambs out of the barn. especially if it's above freezing temperature. Now, if it's freezing, they can get in there, but if it's above freezing, they need to come out of the barn, not be allowed into it. The other time where the lambs can be infected by coccidia is during weaning. And a lot of sheep farmers will wean their lambs off the mamas, and that puts a lot of stress on the lamb. It makes them more susceptible to these problems of coccidia. But I never wean the lambs. I leave the lambs on the mamas as long as possible, because the mother will know when it's time to wean the lamb more than I do. And it makes a healthier lamb if they get to nurse the mother a little bit longer. And you're not going to get more than one lamb crop a year out of a ewe, or else you'll ruin her health. Plus, the sheep farmers I know that try to wean their lambs early to get like 2 crops of lambs out of a ewe a year, they usually end up getting just singles out of that ewe, while if you do it just once a year, you're going to get twins. So you really don't get ahead. So a lot of people don't see the need to wean their lambs. The Ohio State article goes on to tell us that the mature animals are largely immune to the parasite. They don't really have the problem. It's really just the lambs, but they are a reservoir of infection. They have the parasite in them, and they're going to spread that all through your barn and every place else. But the mature animals are not the problem. The article is also telling us that coccidiosis is a problem in intensive production systems. And even some pasture rearing situations can mimic these confinement systems, because you keep them confined with a lot of fecal material that's concentrated, they're going to get coccidiosis, and that's the problem. So in my own operation, outside my barn, you can see all the manure that's out there, that's left there by the sheep. Now, this is in February, and so they're not really hatching out at this point, but there's a ton of manure out here. So this is that same area in June, and though the manure makes everything grow really well, it's also got these oocytes. It's got coccidia in there, and that's really what did this lamb in, I'm pretty sure. I let it get back in the same area for the winter pasture. I should have kept it out of the barn area entirely, and so it got infected because I left it in there. So what is the natural cure for coccidia without chemicals? How do you do that? The number one cure for coccidia is that your lambs need to be born in the winter. They don't need to be born in the spring or summer or fall. When they're born in the winter, all the poop that's got these coccidia oocytes in them, they're not going to hatch, they're not going to sporulate. And your mature animals are not going to have a problem with coccidiosis as much. The lambs are the ones that have the problem, so the number one thing you can do is to try your best to get your lambs born in the winter from December until January. So how do you make sure your lambs are born in the winter? Well, it's real simple. You run the ewes and the rams together all year long. You never separate your rams from your ewes. You keep it all together, and they'll do just fine, because nature knows the best time to raise lambs is in the winter, and they will naturally bear their lambs to be born in the winter. I'm going to back up that statement with this research paper about how the photoperiod, or length of day, controls the sheep reproduction cycle. Both the rams and the ewes will get ready to reproduce starting in July. The ewes will come into estrus in July and August, and the rams will start producing more sperm starting in July. And so if you look at this chart, you can see that the days start to become shorter after June 21st. And so in the middle of July, the sheep notice that, and they start their reproduction cycle. So as the days begin to shorten, the sheep start their reproduction cycle in July and August. And 5 months later, in December and January, in the middle of the winter, they had their offspring, because that's the most advantageous time for sheep to bear their lambs to get around these problems. So quit listening to people on YouTube telling you to separate your rams from your ewes and let them run together year-round, and you won't have a problem. It is because someone has told you to interfere with a natural process is why you have coccidia in your sheep. Just leave them alone. That's all you got to do. Just leave them alone. The second cure for coccidia or coccidiosis is to keep the sheep and the lambs out of the barn area. If it's warm weather, they need to lamb out there on pasture. They don't need to be anywhere around the barn. And that's true for even afterwards, even after they get a little bit older, but especially during the lambing season, and it's warm weather above freezing, they don't need to be in the barn. So the second cure is to keep them out of the barn area during warm weather. Sheep never need to be confined. They need to be out on pasture. They're a lot healthier that way. And if we'll follow nature and know what nature wants us to do, we can always come out a lot better. The third cure for coccidiosis is never wean your lambs. Let the lambs nurse on the mothers, and they'll be just fine. Weaning stresses out the lambs and makes them open for coccidia infection, and it really doesn't help provide that many more offspring. Well, thanks, and I hope you enjoyed the video.